The only real God is the one that you believe in. Start looking for the God in others. And if you find you're tuning into a wave, well then I don't know much about being saved.
Welcome in, everybody.
Hello, everybody.
This is Spiritual Philosophy Chatter with the Joneses. I'm Danny Jones.
And I am Samantha Jones.
All right. Welcome to anybody that's joining us again for another episode and anybody that's joining us for the first time. Welcome.
Welcome, welcome.
We appreciate it. We very much do. So here we are, babe. Episode 6.
Yes.
And what is this episode?
This is Surviving Grief.
Surviving grief. All right. Sounds like a heavy topic.
Yeah, we're going to try and make it
Yeah,
lighter.
we do.
Yeah.
Okay, well, before we do that, did you want to recap last week?
Yes.
Anything?
Yes, but actually, it's very exciting because we have 6 more 5-star ratings on iTunes.
All right.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, everybody, for those. Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have 2 new Facebook reviews, too, as well. We really love these. They help people find us and know that, we're fun to listen to or whatever. So, but here's the one from Facebook that I wanted to read. This is from Cassie. It says, "This podcast is so enlightening. I have enjoyed every episode and cannot wait for more. It is very thought-provoking. They are also funny and keep it light and entertaining while also delivering wonderful messages."
Awesome.
Yay. Thanks, you, Cassie.
That was really cool.
We really appreciate that.
Very much.
For everybody that's done this for us so far and all of the support that we've had, we really appreciate it.
Yeah.
We enjoy doing this.
Yeah, I mean, I thought when you first came up or had the thought to do it, and you shared that with me, I thought, okay, well,
Yeah.
who's really going to
Who's
want to?
going to want to listen to us?
Cool.
I like to listen to
flattering.
us.
Yeah.
But, not everybody likes listening.
So what
Anyways,
else?
That's all I have.
You had a question, I thought.
Oh, that's right. Smart. There is a listener question. It is, when you are told a prediction, are you also told when this event is going to happen? And the answer to that is no, I'm not. For the most part, really, no. Occasionally, I'll feel something like maybe it'll happen on a certain day or it'll be soon, but for the most part, I am not told when it's going to happen. And I can't speak for other psychics on that, but I can tell you that I've had a lot of psychic readings, and there has never been one that has been accurate on the time frame.
Right.
And they've most have been accurate on everything else. So
That's interesting.
yeah, so that tells us that time is a really, really difficult thing to predict.
Yeah, and, there
Right.
really such a thing as time per se?
Right,
I equate time with a clock, and that's something we created
right,
that man needs. Makes sense. But if there isn't really this quote unquote time, then it seems like their
right.
frame of it would be very different than ours.
I think so, and I think that they also don't want us to focus on those types of
Or
things.
try to alter
Right,
the future.
exactly. And it's, like you said, it's so different for them over there. And for us, it's like we feel like everything is in such a rush. Like we have such a small amount of time.
Yes.
So I think that they maybe are also trying to just say, it's okay, slow down.
I'm
and,
so guilty of that.
I am too.
I just want to get it all done right
Mhm.
now. But I don't, because I enjoy the journey, that process, even though
Mhm.
some of it is frustrating as hell,
Yes.
like
This is
computers.
true. Yes, we've been having some computers.
But anyways, so yeah, but another thing that you and I talked about was how time itself and the illusion of it when something's really fun and exciting,
Yeah.
how time seems to go by very fast.
It does.
But when I'm at work, I can't wait to get out of here, and it
Right.
drags. That is another one of those common thing that all humans,
Right.
pretty sure all humans experience,
I
which
think
says,
so.
is it really speeding up and slowing down?
It's so, oh my gosh.
Not
this is
according
one of
to
those-
our clock, but according to time itself or whatever. I
Right.
think it does.
I think so too. I think we could do a whole topic on this because
Right.
it's one of those things that I almost feel like we can't fully grasp because it's so far out of anything that we could logically understand.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, yeah, time is
Well,
a
I mean,
very
Einstein's
interesting
already
concept.
proved that you could bend time.
This
So
is true. Yes.
okay, well, enough of the Einstein.
Yes. But thank you for the question.
Yes,
the,
thank
the
you.
short of it is no. Again, I can't speak for other psychics, but for myself, no. Time is not really something that comes with my prediction.
Right.
I do have to say, though, that I have noticed that the things that are smaller, I seem to get those predictions and then they happen faster than maybe something like I talked about that car accident on the last episode.
Yeah.
That took about 4 months to play out. It wasn't like a really huge, severe thing. So it's almost like they're in the middle. Like it wasn't a short amount of time. It wasn't a long amount of time. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Right.
the intensity
Right.
of the situation is almost like there's more time in between when I'm told and when it happens.
That's an interesting observation, that
That's a hypothesis.
or hypothesis. What,
Big
and
word.
what would it? What's the purpose? What's the purpose of waiting longer
I don't
to
know.
share something? Again, I feel like it's so maybe you don't rush out to alter
That
any
could
course
be,
of anything.
but the fact that I write them down makes me think that maybe that's not it. I'm not sure. I haven't really figured it out yet, but that's a part of this gift that I love is that they don't tell me everything. And
Yeah.
so we get to like dig into these and try and figure them out ourselves.
Right.
So, but we're definitely not, haven't figured this one out yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Pretty cool.
I am
All right.
okay.
So are we ready?
I am ready.
All right. Well, episode 6, Surviving Grief. Here we come.
Driving grief. Yes.
Why don't you start this out?
All right. So this episode, I really felt that it was an important one because I do deal with grief on an everyday basis. I'm not necessarily meaning my own, but as a medium, I take on other people's grief, and I read a lot of people that are smack dab in the middle of it, whether their loss happened a day ago or 5 years ago or 20 years ago. Grief is just one of those things that it seems like every human goes through it. Because I think we've talked about this in the past where there seems to be only two things that every single human on this planet has in common, and really even like trees and flowers and all of those things, is that every single thing is born and it dies.
Yep.
We're all going to go through this, and it's very scary to think about, but it does actually, for me, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but for me, knowing that like my relatives have gone through it, it actually helps me relax a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like that. Well, they went first and they went through it, so I'll be okay.
Well, knowing what I know now.
Right. Well, knowing what
Before,
I know now, yeah,
when
but
it was like,
before.
okay, so-and-so passed away, where'd they go?
Right.
Oh my God, what's going to happen?
Right. You do. You start to panic over it. So
Yeah.
that's one of the things I'm hoping that with this episode, we can help people to understand their grief a little bit more, maybe some of our personal stories and things from our listeners.
You did say
will help.
something real quick, though, there, that,
Sure.
that there's no irony that everything that exists on this earth, everything,
Yeah.
has to be born and has to die.
Everything dies.
Everything.
Everything.
That's
That's all
not
we
just
have in
an
common.
irony or a coincidence. That it's not just, to me, just simple laws of physics either. It's,
Right.
There's some deeper meaning even to that.
Right.
That-
Absolutely.
That it's like your rite of passage
Mhm.
or non-rite of passage. I don't know, however we're going to call it, but
This is another one of those subjects that you could really, really pick apart because
Right.
it's like, well, everything eats. No, it doesn't, though. Everything drinks. Well, no, it doesn't. I mean, that's what I've done with this is really pull it apart. Anyways,
Right.
that's a whole other thing. But so going back to kind of what I was hoping for this episode was just so that we could help people with their grief, but also for caregivers of people that are dealing with grief, because it is really, really difficult to know how to deal with somebody that may be in the middle of their grieving process. We were talking about this the other day that I actually look back and I feel sorry for the people that were around me when my mom passed. That was a really hard time and people don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
So maybe with some of the things that we're going to share, maybe people will be able to help their loved ones that are still here to cope with their grief.
I think because that had such an impact on you, it's not by mistake that you ended up being here doing this kind of work. I mean,
so.
You're dealing with more grief in a funeral home, for crying out loud.
I do. You know? I deal with a lot of it, but I've been through a lot of it because I've been through a lot of loss myself, and we'll talk about that in a little while. But I do, you know how I am. I like to tell you the definition of things, so I'm going to tell you the definition of grief.
Go for it.
Grief is the normal process of reacting to a loss. The loss may be physical, such as a death, social, such as a divorce, or occupational, such as a job. Emotional reactions of grief can include anger, guilt, anxiety, sadness, and despair. Physical reactions of grief can include sleeping problems, changes in appetite, physical problems, or illness. But then and this is obviously accurate, but I wanted to hear what real life people had to say, not what Webster's dictionary had to say. So I asked some of the listeners on our page how they describe grief in one word or one phrase. And some of the things that were said were never ending, heart-wrenching, excruciating, painful, exhausting, suffocating, never ending, unbearable, and torture. So I think that we all can see that this is a very universal feeling. Yeah. This grief, we've all actually of the people that answered our poll questions, 100% of them said that they have suffered grief from the loss of a loved one. 100%. So maybe that's a third thing that we all have in common. Well, no, because not everybody does, like babies and stuff.
Right.
They don't grieve. But again, it is something that most of us have in common and that we can help each other with. You know what I mean? We all go through it. So let's see. I asked our listeners, first of all, how long they felt that their grieving process has lasted. And 26 people answered this question, and 25 said less than a year, and more than a year, and one said less than a year.
Wow.
Yeah. I was a little bit surprised by that. I've always felt like my grief lasted a lot longer with my mom than most people, but I'm starting to realize that it was average. But I think that I should maybe share my story. I think that might be helpful, just so that everybody understands that I as a medium know from this side how things work, but I also know from the other side because I've been there myself.
Right.
So my mom actually was my first big loss. Like I've had lost a few animals before that, or distant relatives, but as far as somebody that was real major in my life, my mom was the first one, and my mom died very suddenly. She had some health problems, but nothing that necessarily I thought that she was going to die from.
Right.
She was gaining a lot of weight, and she was on prednisone for her asthma, and so these things were kind of like spiraling out of control in her body. But what had happened in this process of her, like she had been in and out of the hospital for her asthma, was she became addicted to morphine, which seems to be like the biggest problem that our society is facing right now as far as like that kind of thing goes, is the opiate. Yeah. So what happened is the day before she passed, she had been released from the hospital, and her doctor was out of town, and a new doctor had taken over her case, and he gave her a fentanyl patch that was twice the dosage that the other doctor was giving, and didn't tell her that. She didn't know. I mean, maybe he did tell her, but she didn't know. You know what I mean? Like, that didn't process for her. She wasn't in that frame of mind.
Right.
So what we believe happened was that she overdosed from that patch, along with not knowing that patch was a double dose, and took a morphine pill on top of it. That's what we believe happened. Right. So that morning that she passed, I got the phone call from her best friend telling me that she had passed away, and it was my life completely changed at the moment that that phone call came in. It completely changed.
I'll tell you what, for a first time loss, it's on a human level. Yeah. Losing another human, that's a huge one.
It was bad.
That's a huge one.
It was bad, and my mom and I, we didn't have the best relationship growing up, so it wasn't like it was, all of these wonderful memories. There was a lot there that wasn't said. There was a lot of guilt that I know we both had, and a lot of regrets and things that were never said. So when that happens, you all of a sudden realize, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to, these things were never finalized. We never talked about these. I have to live with these things for the rest of my life. And that was definitely one of the harder things. But I think, well, in the stages of grief, the first one that you deal with is denial. And you can put shock in there with that too. And that's definitely what happened for me right after.
Yeah, I think the first is, if I were to categorize it, how it happens for me is shock, denial, grief, and then healing.
It comes in waves. And I remember very distinctly that initial, like, when it hit me. And I remember standing in the hallway and I was like, oh my God, what just happened? And I like started screaming. It was just overwhelming. And then it goes, you're like, no, this can't be right. This isn't happening. This is a joke. Somebody's making this up. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then
amazing how the mind will argue with itself.
It really, and then, well, bargaining is another step in grief. It's another stage. And I remember the bargaining, too, of please don't let this be real. Please let me get to California because I was living in Vegas at the time. Please let me get there, and this is some kind of sick joke. That went on for a while. I think that it was only at the funeral that it really hit me that this was really, really happening. And it's still, I still to this day will have moments where I'm like, I can't believe she's gone. Right. And it's been 15 years. I can't believe she's not here.
I think there's moments even in the grieving process where you feel like you've progressed or you're coming out,
right?
If you want to say that, like you're coming out of it, maybe towards the healing. And it could be multiple years later that, boom, like it hits you like a ton of bricks, almost like it did, maybe not as heavy as the first time, but feels around that time. You know,
it does, yeah.
So that's an interesting thing. And I don't know. We perceive grief. I tend to think that those moments, like say multiple years later, when you're reminiscing or thinking about them and you have that moment of grief and it's really heavy.
Yeah.
To us on this side, it feels like grief. Mm-hmm. To them on that side, what it feels like to me is that's their way of reaching out and connecting with you.
I think
they don't want to make you sad.
No.
Unfortunately, we equate, the death date. So we hear a song that reminds us of a time, like you told me before about like the tape that you made, and you would play it continuously, almost intentionally to make yourself
I
be
definitely
emotional.
think those are all places that we visit in grief. They're just a part of the process, and they definitely come and go. And for me, even now, still, if I am in one of those like breakdown modes where I feel like everything is going bad in my life and I like cry, one of those big cries, it will turn into my mom isn't here and this isn't fair. Every single time when it's that deep of like emotions for me, it will turn into that. And I haven't really ever talked to anybody about if they go through that too. So that would be interesting. But it's one of those times where it does hit me all over again that she's not here.
Right.
And then I roll it into Dad's not here either.
Right.
And Grandma's not here. Anyways, so let's go back to a little bit about my story because I do feel like maybe this will help some people. One of the things that you don't think about when you start going through this, when it's that person that you're so close to, is all of the details that comes with it, the funeral, all the people you have to call. I had to tell my brother, and that was really, really, really difficult for me. That was very difficult. And planning my mom's funeral, too. But like I said, it was at that moment at the funeral, I will never forget this, where we had, after the service, they took us up to the gravesite, and we went into the limo to take us up to the gravesite, and that's when it hit. That's when it was like, whoa, I can't believe this. That was a surreal moment where you never think that you're going to be there because, I was 26 years old when my mom died. And I honestly never really thought about the possibility of her dying suddenly. I always thought that she would die, we would know. It would happen gradually. It would get worse, and just not get better. Never in a million years did I think that it was going to happen like this. And so all of a sudden you're hit with a million different things. And at 26 years old, I was, in charge of not just my mom's estate because I was the executor, But I had a 16-year-old brother that I had to deal with. And one of the things that I had promised my mom that was, if anything had ever happened to her, that I would take care of him. Not to have him live with me, because he did have his father that he could live with, but that I would take care of him. Right. And I have. I don't have to anymore, but I did.
No, you honored that. You did it, and I kind of came in to your life at a time where that was happening.
Right.
So
yeah, and it wasn't just like dealing with my brother, but I do hear this from a lot of people, that if the person that passes was the glue that held your family together, it's literally like pulling out that Jenga block and everything falling apart. And that's exactly what happened to my family.
That's a mother's role, that's for sure. So I could see it crumbling with
everybody turned on everybody else. It was okay at first. At first, we all came together and we just wanted to be together and remember her and talk about her and love her.
Right.
But after that newness, it became a fight. It became what everybody wanted, and our grieving processes, and it just got ugly. And I do hear that from a lot of people, that they go through that as well. So please know that if you're going through that in your grieving process, I think that why that happens is because you're all dealing with things differently, and grief is not just crying and depression. Grief is anger.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of anger associated with it. And so you get your family that is all having their different feelings from their grief. They're all in different stages.
Yeah.
And that is bound to happen. I had a relative that was close to my mother, and he was sitting in my mom's garage one day, and I was crying about her. And this was maybe 3 months after she died. And he looked at me and he said, "She's dead. Get over it." Oh, that was the wrong thing to say.
Take it easy, buddy.
I don't know how much we talked after that one.
Yeah.
That is definitely something to never do.
Grief itself, the process is tough, but it will bring out
the ugly.
It will bring out the ugly. In a lot of families, it sucks, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Again, it just goes back to, if we could just talk to each other and lean on each other in a positive
and
light,
that's really that was one of the things on my list here, was like ways to help people that are going through this process, because it's hard for people to understand that haven't been through it before, and so a couple of the ways that I had listed that you can help somebody is just to listen to them, really. You know what I mean? That's all I really needed for the most part, was just somebody to listen to me. You don't necessarily need to even talk back.
Right.
Because sometimes it's like, you feel like you're saying the right thing. Even as a medium, I do that a lot of times, where I feel like I'm saying the right thing, but it's not the right thing. So sometimes it's just okay to just listen.
Yeah, because I think we just internalize a lot of it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're right. I totally agree with that.
Yep.
Going and talking to somebody, even if it's not for listening for the magic response or suggestion, it's just getting it out of me and out.
Oh, absolutely. It really is. It's soul cleansing to do it, and it does help with the grief a lot. I did a lot of like support group type things. We'll get into that later, but that really helped too. But another way that you can really help is just to check on people that are grieving. Just send them a quick text message. Hey, how are you? Do you need anything? Because one of the most frustrating things for me was that everybody said after my mom died, "I'm here if you need anything." I can't tell you how many people said that to me. If you need anything, my mom was one of the most giving people I've ever met in my entire life. So people, they wanted to give back because she had given to them.
Right.
But they didn't really maybe know how, or whatever the case may be. So everybody just said, if you need anything, I'm here. Right. But those people never really came back and checked on me. It was just like they said that and then they left. I mean, one of my mom's friends at her funeral, he was like, "Man, your mom, she helped me so much, and if you ever need that kind of help." And then I've never seen him again since then. So stick with those things. When you tell people that, that are grieving, that if they need anything, check on them and help them, because it's important. It is. It's a process, and sometimes we push people away when we're grieving, but it's almost like, I don't want you to love me, but I want you to love me. Does that make sense? Like, no. Oh, wait, don't go.
Well, something that comes along with grief is fear of it.
Yes.
So even if somebody that wasn't super close to your mom, but knew her,
Yeah.
came to the service and was like, anything you need. A lot of those people might have felt like, this scares me.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean? Because of the intensity and the emotion, and then looking at your own life and going, what grief do I have left to fear in this life?
Sure.
You know,
it does. It opens that up, and that comes to I had asked about PTSD on our page. If any of our listeners had suffered PTSD after their major loss, what they would consider to be their major loss. And let's see, I believe it was 40% said that they had.
wow.
Yeah. And I'm not really surprised by that, because I'll tell you why. It took me years. It took me a good 3 years, I would say, to actually start to feel normal again. But because of how I lost her, I, after that, became afraid of losing everybody like that suddenly. I couldn't even comprehend how that I could go through that again. That is something that I'm still struggle with today, is how do I face that if it were to happen to me again, because I know how painful it is. And that's definitely PTSD from her passing. I will have anxiety attacks over those types of things, especially now being a medium and hearing things that sometimes are my own voice and not knowing. Right. I will stress on that. It's definitely, I think, something that comes with it for a lot of people. Sometimes even hearing the phone ring, shortly after, that would bring it up, those types of things. But I think that's very common for people.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
That I wrote down here. Before, I mean, you're a unique situation, and not everybody's stories like this, that you lose a mother at a young age, and then you realize you have gifts that now you can communicate with her. So now it's like, I know it's not the same as her being here physically, but she's with you.
Yes.
And you're very aware of it.
Yes.
And that's a beautiful thing.
Yes. I'm very lucky.
You are. Do you feel like the grieving process for you started to get better or subside, the grief itself, even before you found out about the gifts?
So long before.
So you felt like it was getting better, period.
Well, yes. I mean, we're talking 13 years,
right.
And there's no way that I could have been the way that I was in year 1 at year 13. That makes me sad, because I know that there are some people that can't seem to get past it. But I did. It took me a while, and let me tell you what finally did it for me. Because I did go to support groups. I did go to therapy. I tried antidepressants. I tried self-medicating. To be quite honest, I got addicted to opiates.
Right.
Because
easy to do in this day and age.
Well, the week after my mom died, I threw my back out, and I went to urgent care, and they gave me Vicodin, and it started a battle that I dealt with for a long time.
Wow.
A long time. I mean, I never became like super duper addicted like a lot of people, but there's serotonin in those medications. They don't tell you that. So when you're depressed like that, and you take a medication like that, and it makes you feel a little bit happy, even if it's for an hour, it becomes addicting.
Yeah.
They don't tell you how quickly.
Especially when you're
happens.
feeling that down.
Yeah. So that's not obviously the thing that helped me. The thing that helped me was a medium, to be quite honest. It was actually a medium that I had a reading from. I've talked about her, Highland. I talked about her on the last episode. She gave me a reading in 2001, and then in 2000, and I want to say it was 2005 or 2006, she called me and said that she was available for readings, and I hadn't talked to her in all that time.
Wow.
Yeah. So I knew that my mom had played some kind of, instrument in there and arranging that. And she did for me what nothing else could do. She was able to heal that wound for me a little bit. Not close it. It's never closed. It's definitely one of those things that opens still. But she closed it enough that I was able to go on with my life and not wallow in it anymore, because I really, really did. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't. There's no instruction book. I mean, we do have books, but everybody's grief is different.
Yeah.
And so I would get frustrated when I would read things, and it would be like, well, 6 months and you should start to feel better. Well, I was feeling worse at 6 months.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So all of these things were just making it worse. I found this workbook, and I found it very interesting because this workbook is from a grief support group that I went to at my church. And I had been going to church when my mom passed. And so I thought this would be a good place for me to start, right? But it turned really soon into, I can't do this because this is all about God and about how this is God's plan, and I just didn't want to hear it.
Turn it over to God. And,
at that time, it was like...
You don't want to hear that.
No. So it's interesting to see that I only have 3 weeks filled out in here. But this starts in, I believe, the second month of my grief. So it's like month 2, almost to month 3. And what I found the most interesting about this was that the question says, how has the process of grieving been different than you had expected? And 2 months into it, I say, it has taken longer and has been so up and down. So it had taken a lot longer than I expected it to. I'm like, well, you're barely into it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. You're barely into it. And the other thing that I did write in here, actually, I was very honest about my already addiction to opiates in this book. And then I talked about my health, too. It asked, what areas of your life does grief affect? And I said everything. My physical and my mental health, my energy level, my hunger level. I remember constantly sighing. I don't remember how long it went on for, but I couldn't control it. I would just be sitting there and be like, it just helped me feel better. It was almost like that elephant that was sitting on my chest that I couldn't get off. It gave me a little bit of relief, but I gained 60 pounds. My brother lost weight. My brother went down to the lightest weight he's ever been. So everybody, you can see, deals with it differently.
Oh, absolutely. Not just in timeline, but, habits and...
Yep. There were 2 times in my life that I have put on a lot of weight. And one was my mom's passing and the other was my divorce. So that can show you I handle my grief with food and lack of exercise. Because really all I did after my mom died was sleep and cry for a while. I did not make the process any easier for me, which I think is something that I really would like to do for other people, is to help that process be easier, because I did things looking back now that made the situation worse. Like what you were saying about that playlist. There were songs that reminded me of my mom, and so what I did is I made a playlist, and I also had a CD, and I listened to these in my car, because I'm a pet sitter, so I drive all day from one pet sit to the other, and I would get in my car, and I would put this playlist on, and I would cry. And it was very, very unhealthy. And I don't think I've ever told you this story, and this is, it's a good story of how I actually made a friend in this process. But one of those pet sits that I had was in a guard-gated community, and there was this little man that worked at the gate there, and I always pet sit for these people. They were gone all the time, so it was like I was there every other week. And one night I showed up there crying, and he asked me what was wrong, and I told him, I said, my mom passed. And he said that his wife was in the hospital, and he was worried that she was going to be passing any day. So we built a friendship on that. And I would go there to do that sit late at night, and I would cry to him, and he would cry to me. And it was really nice to have that. Do you know what I mean? Somebody that knew that what you were going through.
Right.
Because she did eventually die. So, sorry.
It's okay.
Now I cry.
Well, you brought up a couple points, if I can interject for a second.
Sure.
And, the making the tape and playing that almost intentionally to provoke yourself.
It was.
To feel emotion about it. I don't think it is unhealthy per se. I think it's okay. Emotion is good, no matter what the circumstance. That's the gifts. That's the gift we've been given as humans, is that we have emotion.
It's very important.
I think there's a fine line you just have to be aware of. And I think that's kind of some of the things that we're sharing today, is like what the process is like, some of the things to look out for.
Right.
So when you catch yourself, maybe, and I think this is probably the biggest thing for a lot of people that I've heard, is that in my grief, I can't ever be happy without this person being here in the world anymore.
Right.
And that is a misconception.
It is.
From their side,
yeah.
From the other side's point of view. They want us to love this life and live it to the fullest,
yes.
and love each other to the fullest as much as we can until our time comes. Don't
For sure.
sit and take your time to grieve.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But if you see that you're in a rut,
Yes.
or you're doing things,
Like what I was
habits
doing,
that aren't
yeah.
good,
Mm-hmm.
be honest with yourself.
Yes.
Or go talk to someone and ask them to help pull you out of it, or
Right.
pull yourself out of it. And by that I mean, like you said a minute ago, go to church.
Yeah.
Go talk to a professional,
Yeah,
a therapist. Go talk to a medium.
Yeah.
Go talk to a friend, a family member. Go talk to all of them.
Yep.
Until you've got it out. Because I'll tell you what, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It may not feel like there is, but there is.
I'm proof of that.
You are.
I am, because I will tell you that there were times in that grieving process where I thought that I wanted to be with her. I thought, I'll just drive my car right off this freeway right now. But that's not the way that things are supposed to go.
Well, I'm really
and that's
glad that
not,
you didn't.
Well, I am too, and I never could have. It was just, but I think probably everybody that goes through that grieving process, when it's that intense,
Yeah.
you do. There's different levels of grief, obviously.
Right.
I mean, not everybody goes through this intense of grief. What I went through, I consider it to be pretty extreme because it was sudden. And then there's people that even deal with worse because of circumstances behind the death. I was pretty lucky to know that my mom probably went to sleep and just didn't wake up.
Right.
But I hear a lot of horrible stories, and I know that those people deal with a lot of guilt and a lot of things that they don't know how to talk about because they have things left unsaid to their loved ones. And as being somebody that's been on both sides of that, I can tell you that your loved ones do not want you to dwell on those things.
No.
They do not. I did myself.
Right.
My mom had things and I had things that were left unsaid, and things that she didn't know that she should have known before she found out being there. You know what I mean?
Right.
But we all have those, and they don't want us to dwell on them.
Right.
And when I did meet with that medium and she connected with my mom said, if there's anything that I need to apologize to you for, please know that I'm really sorry, because she knew that there were a lot, but I don't think,
Right.
they usually don't want to get into those specifics. I knew what she was talking about. She knew what I was talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you can also talk to them yourself. You may not be able to hear them back, but if you really hold that kind of grief inside, not really grief, but the guilt inside, you can talk to them and let it out. And trust me, they can hear you.
Oh,
and
yeah.
they want you to let it go. Look at it as almost like a confession, like
Yeah.
going to church. You're letting it out.
But you can do it in private.
You can do it in private. And trust me, they hear you. And I know that there's things, too, that it works the other way, that there's things that person that has passed didn't say. And that's where I come in, and that's where I'm happy to help people. But, of course, not everybody wants to use a medium. But just know that your loved ones let that go. They do. It's
Right.
all water under the bridge. I've talked about this briefly before about a family member of mine that is over there, and we had problems, and it's been very hard for me to let it go. But because he's there, he lets it go. So I'm still learning to do that. But so I know it's hard. It's very difficult to let go of something where those words haven't actually been said. And even after they do, even in human life, just because somebody apologizes doesn't mean that it makes it go away.
No, it doesn't. But I'll tell you what, I have been motivated by some people's grief.
Have you?
By watching like my own parents lose their parents.
Yeah.
And the things that maybe they didn't get to say and share with them. Like my father, for instance, I love my dad, but we're different. We're totally different people. And at a young age, we clashed a lot. And now we've gotten to a point where we've really grown in our relationship. But he shared with me on some occasions, things about his father. And I could see the grief and the emotion inside of him, and the things that he kind of had shared that he wasn't able to say everything he wanted to.
Right.
And so that motivated me, at a late teens, kind of early 20s of, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell my dad, not just you irritate me and you're pissing me off, but I'm going to tell him that I love you and I respect you.
Yeah.
And my mom too. I was always closer with my mom, but as I've gotten older now, I've developed a good relationship with him. So that's motivated me. It's motivated me to go, if I can alleviate some of that grief and guilt,
good for you. Yeah.
Alleviate some of that guilt
Yeah.
in the grieving process
Right.
by doing this now here.
Yes.
Taking the time to share with the people that you love what's really important.
Yes.
So, because it's not going to be easy. You'll still have a little guilt.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I can tell you, I have a lot of different stories of loss in my life, but I took care of my grandmother for 7 years before she passed. And I told her everything that I needed to tell her. I did, because I already learned the hard way from my mom. But I still, after she passed, have guilt because I feel like there were times that I wasn't patient enough with her in those last 7 years. And those are the types of things that I didn't say to her. So we always hold on to those things anyways. Sure. But you do have to learn to let them go.
Yeah, you do.
Now, I have learned the hard way on the other side with my dad as well. And that's a whole other type of grief, because I'll tell you briefly about my dad is that my parents were divorced when I was 2, and my dad and I didn't have a great relationship because my mom was always bad talking to him and made me believe that he was a bad person. And I don't think she meant to do that, but I think maybe that's something that, in divorces it happens sometimes. But so we did not have a good relationship, and he wasn't, completely free of things either. He said things about my mom, and I didn't want to hear that. But anyways, long story short, we stopped talking. We talked on and off until I was about 19, and then the last time I talked to him, I was 19 years old. And then I moved back out here in 2010, and I had been thinking about him. I should really look him up. I mean, things are different now, blah, blah, blah. So I think it was like 2013 or so, I decided I'm going to look him up and see if I can find him and reconnect with him. And instead of finding where I could find him, I found his obituary.
I remember.
And yeah, that was a shock. And how do you mourn somebody that you didn't have a relationship with really, but they are half the reason you're alive? Do you know what I mean? That was I don't know that I've mourned that still.
Right.
I really don't know, but I'm also very lucky on this part that now that I know he's there, we have built a relationship and we have said the things we needed to say. And between my mom, my dad, and I, we have picked things apart, and I now know why things happened the way that they did. And that's another way that as a medium, I can help people, as well as dealing with those things that you didn't deal with somebody when they were alive because you hadn't talked to them in a long time. I never in a million years thought about going to a medium to talk to my dad between the time I found out that he had passed and the time that I found out I was a medium. I just didn't think that he would want to talk to me. As weird as that may sound, I didn't think he would want to talk to me.
And I don't want to put the blame completely on your mom in this, but she didn't make it important to have a relationship with you. So at a young age, you're raised with that kind of ideal.
For sure.
Of course, like for me, my first divorce, because I had a child with my ex-wife, that was a hard one. That was a different kind of grief.
Different kind of grief, yeah.
But it was grief.
For sure.
And that's why I say, I mean, I've lost loved ones and very close people to me in my life. But that was a different kind of grief. It wasn't death, but it sure felt like it almost, because I knew that I wasn't going to be around my child every day. So when I talk about like a dark tunnel, that was probably one of the darkest tunnels I had been in.
I know, I met you during that.
I didn't know when I would see the end of it, but I hung in there, and thank God I met you, and I had, family that were there supporting and listened to me just let it out, you know.
Very helpful. But yeah, that's a whole other kind of grief. And you know what, looking back at my life, I think that the two worst types of grief that I've experienced was that sudden death and heartbreak. Yeah. Really, heartbreak is the worst. But the thing about heartbreak is that there's still that side of you that's like, well, maybe we'll reunite.
Right.
Not now, but you know what I mean? Like when you first start to go through that and maybe you have that doubt of this is the right thing or whatever, that person is still there. Yeah. You can still talk to them. There's still that chance you might run into them, whatever the case may be.
But it's similar because you feel like the pain I remember that first heartbreak was like, you could really feel.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. The first heartbreak,
weird.
I don't even know how. I was like, how am I going to survive this?
Yeah.
Wait, just wait. But, yeah, it's not this. I mean, it's the same, but it's very different in the way that with a death, it's so final that makes that grief really, really even worse.
Yeah.
You know, it really does. And another thing that I had asked the listeners on our page were about the loss of a pet versus a human loss. Because a lot of us consider our animals to be like family.
Oh, yeah.
I know we do. These are our babies.
Yeah.
So this question, 50% said that it was harder to lose a pet, and 50% said harder to lose a human. But also people commented on this and said it very much depended on the kind of loss. And I am definitely, I can relate to that because my second big loss was my chocolate lab Sierra, my very first Labrador. And she died of cancer called hemangiosarcoma, which we didn't even know she had. She had had clear blood test results. Everything seemed fine. And one day she just collapsed. And we got her to the dog ER, and they told us what was wrong. Put her on the operating table, and she died.
Mm.
And so it was like literally 5 to 6 hours between when we knew she was sick and when she died. And I was in denial the whole time. I'm like, she's going to be fine. Everything's fine. You know.
Right.
Yeah. Boom. Hard loss.
Man.
I definitely put that above, and I hate to say this, grandma, but that was harder than losing my grandma.
Right.
Because my grandma was 87 years old.
That's different.
And she had no quality of life.
I don't think I'd feel bad for saying that.
I
It's just
but I
different,
can I can hear her right now.
The love is
more important than
the
your
love
grandma.
is
But
there.
no.
It's different.
Yes.
It's there, and that's all that matters.
Yes. And that also goes into another question that I asked was about sudden loss. If people felt that sudden loss was worse than expected loss, and 100% of those people said that sudden loss was worse. So I definitely feel like, that's where the heavy duty grief comes in. I mean,
especially the shock factor to begin with. When it's sudden, I mean, it's like you don't. At least with grandma, it's like, okay, you were sort of kind of just waiting.
We were waiting. She was miserable.
And then she passes and you grieve.
Yes.
But there's no shock involved in that situation.
No, there wasn't. Yeah, with these, that was.
But animals for sure. I mean, I've always considered myself like, I love animals. I'm not a huge, I don't go out and advocate and picket and things like that. But when I had to put my first animal down as an adult, that was, whoa.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'm a lot more connected to this being than I thought I was. And that was my black lab in my previous marriage. And, she didn't want to be my ex didn't want to be in the room when it happened. And I understand everybody's different, but I couldn't not be in there. I was like, if you're going off, you're going to be held by me while you go.
Yeah, for sure.
And so when Sequoia, the chocolate lab you had when we started dating, when she finally passed away, I thought to myself, I think I even said this to you, like, I wonder how that's going to go for me emotionally when she goes, because she was sort of like my stepdoggy. Yeah. But it was the same, man. I mean, I was just bawling it and like a baby and on the floor and holding her. And, the way we did it with Sabbath, the puppy the black lab we have now at the time, who was a puppy, that we brought him in the room so he was aware of what was happening, not we leave with her and come home without her.
Yes, and I've done that with a few of my dogs, and I do think it's very important. Yeah. Because when Sierra, my first chocolate lab, died, my yellow lab that was with her, he had no idea what was going on. We had been out with them and brought them home, and that's when she collapsed. And so I put her in my car and took her to the ER, and she never came home. And so he had no idea what had happened. And even as an animal communicator trying to explain, it's still hard sometimes. Right. So with Sabbath, I definitely felt like I wanted him to see Sequoia. Sequoia saw Tahoe. I just think that that's very helpful for them. However, I will say that Sabbath has grieved more for Sequoia than I've ever seen a dog grieve. He was very attached to her. So we do know that the animals grieve too. And that's a whole other thing, is that, if you lose an animal or a person, you have to remember that your dog friends they've lost them too.
Mm-hmm.
My mom had 2 dogs when she passed, and that was one of her big concerns too, like if something happened to her with her dogs. And so I did the best that I could with them, but I could tell with them too, they're like, when's she coming back? You know? It's
Yeah,
sad.
so they can't cry and they can't talk, but I'll tell you what, they feel it just like you or I feel it.
I've taken on this new pet sit recently. I've told you about this. This is an African gray, and the wife recently passed. I want to say a year ago. And since the wife passed, the gray has not talked in the wife's voice. This was my first time pet sitting for him about a month ago. And I was out there and I was talking to the bird, and he started talking in the wife's voice.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was communicating with her while I was there because, you know, the bird really didn't understand what had happened. He didn't know she died. She just didn't come home. Right. So I explained to him what happened at the consultation. I really believe that's why he started talking in her voice again, because now he knew what had happened and that it was okay and she had passed. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So that was a very interesting
Did he
thing.
give you anything back when you explained?
I haven't explained to him.
Oh, you
yet.
haven't? Okay,
No,
okay.
I had left him a note that I'm a medium and that if he wanted to talk to his wife, I'd be happy to do that. And he said he was interested, but I haven't told him that the bird talked in the wife's voice yet. But
right.
But then we also have a friend whose dad has passed, and they have a bird, and that bird talks in his dad's voice, and that's got to be tough, especially for his mom to hear the bird talk in his voice all the time. Like,
I don't mean to laugh, but yeah, I would be like, I'm sorry, that bird's gotta go.
I mean, honestly, like I had a bird, and after my divorce, the bird started talking like my ex-husband, and so he had to stay with my ex-husband because I'm really sorry, but I can't have my ex-husband's voice in my house with my new husband's voice. That just doesn't work. Anyways, birds are awesome. Yeah.
Thank you for making that
sacrifice. Yeah. He has a good life. So, anyways, the animals mourn, and
right.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
It's funny when talking about Sabbath is that Sabbath didn't come into our life with you practicing the gifts that you had, even though you knew that you had animal gifts a long time ago.
Right.
You weren't really using them at the time.
Right.
So Zuma, our newest Great Dane, however, was brought into the home with you doing it pretty much immediately.
Yeah.
So it's funny how you say Sabbath doesn't want to talk, doesn't like it because it's not something you started with.
For sure.
So I wish that he would respond when, like when you could ask him. So we brought you to Koya's thing and we let you see her go. And
he doesn't want to talk about it.
It's like, are you okay? Do you have any questions?
He's the weirdest dog. Like I've tried because we have talked about it a couple of times. I mean, he will talk to me. It's just different. He's just very different from Zuma. But I know he still mourns. We do talk about it when he gets down because he's a very emotional dog.
Yeah, he is.
We have talked about it, and I've said to you a couple of times he's still mourning his sister. That's been really hard for me to watch. He loved her so much. It's the boys too, if you notice. Like Tahoe was the same way.
Yeah.
So mourning, grieving. It
was kind of like a mom to him too. So I could see how it would be really hard for him.
They were best friends. So yeah, the doggies they experience all of this too, and. One of the things that we haven't talked about yet, and maybe we should talk about real quick, and it's a hard thing to talk about, is that sometimes these things happen because something has to come out of them. Something good sometimes comes out of a loss. And it's very hard for us to, as humans, wrap our head around that.
Right.
And if looking back 15 years, if somebody would have told me that the loss of my mom would have catapulted me to have a career as a medium, I would have told them they were crazy. Because when you're smack dab in the middle of that grief, how can this possibly be something that is going to have a good outcome to it?
Right.
It ruined my life, or so I thought at the time. But it didn't. I was just in that, for like 3 years, I was in that phase of like, everybody sucks. I don't want anything to do with any of this. Do you know what I mean? Like I've told you, I had a shirt that I wore out in public. I love this shirt. It said, "I'm out of bed and dressed. What more do you want?" And that was literally my mindset for like 3 years. And then I snapped out of it a little bit. But I do look back now and I realize that my mom's passing was indeed a gift. Yeah. It was a gift to her because she wasn't comfortable or happy with her life. It was a gift to me because I can talk to her and I can do this for other people. And that's unique for everybody, that everybody dies. So it's not like there's always going to be one of those, but I definitely see it more with like people that have died young, especially with like kids that have died. Like there's an epidemic right now of, I believe it's cocaine laced with fentanyl or something along there. And I can't tell you how many of these mothers I've talked to that have lost their kids that way. But the interesting is these kids are now helping their mothers from the other side. Yeah. And one of them, Krista. Hi, Krista.
Hi, Krista.
She's actually a medium herself now.
Cool.
Yeah. So these things do happen, and when you're in the middle of them, you don't want to see it. Right. But later on, you'll look back and you'll see that not only maybe was there a reason, but that you came through it okay. Yeah. And you made it through. And it's okay. And life does go on. It's never the same. It isn't. No. There will never be a day that I can, put my arms around my mom again. But that's okay. It is what it is.
Well, it's not okay, but it is what it is.
But it is, yeah. I know that I'll be with her again someday. And
that's what's okay.
Yes. But it wasn't. You know what I mean? It's like I had to go through that process. I had to get to the point where I could see that it didn't ruin my life.
Right.
I'm still me, and I'm still living my best life.
You said, we might have, a spouse that's lost another spouse that's listening, or a parent that's lost a child that's lost a parent. Please don't get us wrong when we say that all of these things happen for a reason. There's a reason we're all born and we're all die. And some go soon, some go later. But kind of how your mom shared with you, that when it was her time, she was actually given a choice.
Yeah, she was.
So there is a reason.
Yeah.
She chose the reason.
Yeah, she did.
And it exactly what you just said was the reason, because she could do better for you from there and for your brother than she could here.
We talked about that in the Heaven episode, I believe.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, so if you haven't heard that story, it is in the What's Next episode about my mom telling me that she left.
And I think that's proof right there that it's in why, it's going to remain a mystery for some people. Right. Why did my little infant or toddler or something happen?
Right.
You'll never know, or maybe one day you will know.
Right. That child, because I do have a close friend that lost her son stillborn, and I haven't really asked her if she ever discovered if there was a reason for it, but a lot of times there is,
And even if you don't find out until you reconnect with them and pass yourself, you'll find out.
He may have had some issues that they didn't know, and if he would have been born, he could have been miserable his whole life, and they would never know that until they go to the other side. So those are the types of things we have to look at, too, that we may not know what that reason is. But it does happen for a reason, and you will be okay, and you will get through it. And for the people that are caregivers to those that are going through it, just be supportive and listen, and don't try not to judge, because that is the hard thing when people are like, get over it. You can't.
Right.
You can't just get over this.
Right.
You can't. The more that you have support, the more that people try and help you maybe do things different, like go out and do new things that you haven't done before, take your mind off of things. Those are the types of things you need to do. Don't be like me. Don't listen to sad songs for 3 years straight in your car. It doesn't help. Right. It doesn't. You get to a point where you have to let those things kind of go a little bit and try and heal. That's what they want. They want us to do that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
They want us to celebrate them.
Yes, they
Not
do.
to feel guilty and live the rest of our life being sad. Go ahead and grieve. It's important, and we all do it.
Yep.
But watch out for those ruts
and
those bad habits.
Yes.
And like Samantha said earlier, talk to whoever.
Yep.
Whoever you trust that you can talk to.
Even if you're like me, 15 years into it, sometimes I just cry. Sometimes I just want to talk about my mom. And I know you've heard the same stories, and you still listen to the same stories. But what's interesting about this is that now my mom triggers different memories in me. So you're hearing new things now.
Right.
But it may get old for you to hear for the 15th time how this person died. but that's what the person grieving needs. They need to tell you that story for the 15th time. So just let them do it. That's the best advice I can give to a caregiver or somebody like that, or a family or friend.
I agree. Well, that was a good episode.
I think so. I hope that we helped some people and, got some good information out. We're not experts by any means.
Oh, no. I don't have a PhD in anything.
No, I don't either.
But daydreaming, maybe.
Hey, if I could get an honorary degree in grieving, I'd probably have one after everything I've been through. But I don't. And, all I can do is help people with their loss. And I really do love doing that because I think that if you can help support each other, that alone.
Right. Well, if anything, we filled the airways with another hour of philosophy chatter.
We sure did. An emotional philosophy chatter, yes.
Well, would you like to plug anything before we say goodbye?
I had mentioned last week that I will be doing an expo called the Health and Healing Expo on June 23rd. I have on my website, you can make a reservation on there right now, but it's not by times. But you can go on my website, which is SamanthaJonesPsychicMedium.com, and you can make a reservation already for that. It's June 23rd here in Southern California at the Westlake Hyatt. The readings are $30 for, it's 15 minutes. And again, that's on my website. And then we have our pages. We have a Twitter now. And so Facebook, Twitter, those are obviously Spiritual Philosophy Chatter with the Joneses. But the short of it is at Spiritual Chats.
All right.
Yay. And then, of course, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud. We're trying to get on iHeartRadio. Anybody knows about iHeartRadio? Hi.
We'll get there.
We're
soon.
working on it. Yeah. But keep those reviews coming, too. We love them. Keep your questions coming. I love the questions. I love all of them.
Still looking for music, too, to share.
Yes, music. That's a good thing, too. Yeah.
So, if you're in and around the Westlake area around that time, check it out. It's worth it. Huh? Samantha's good. Really good.
So I think that was all of our pages, right?
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll plug mine. I posted a picture today.
Yes, you
on
did. That's right.
Facebook. Yeah, I did a Keith Moon of The Who, the drummer of The Who.
It's very cool. It's very detailed.
It's a colorful one.
It out. Yeah, I like it because it's got so much to it. It reminds me of like the Highlights magazines. I had said this to you where you
find all the things.
Like find the moon, find the anvil. You know what I mean? It's got so much stuff. You got to just go to his page.
I like to make them interactive, so make you search and look around.
And you do a good
Lots
job.
of eye candy.
Yeah.
So you can check that out on Facebook. That's at D Jones Art Collection. And I'm also on Instagram, and that's hashtag D Jones Art Collection. Working on a website. My lovely wife here is doing that for me, so that'll be happening soon.
Next week I should have it.
Yeah, and once I get that up, then I'll be able to sell prints of all my paintings. So
excited.
I'm too, and this one was good. So
yeah.
I'm just happy. They're all good. They're like
they're
my
all
babies.
good.
They're just different.
Yeah.
So anyways, but we are going to play a song today.
Yes.
At the end here when we're done. This song, Rob Brown performs on. This was a band he was in, believe it's 2013 that this was done. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. The band is called Stobo, and the song is called It's Love in a Higher Sense.
I like this song. It reminds me of, is it Live that it reminds
It has a similar live feel.
I like it. It's different.
They're really good. I've the main singer-songwriter, the band is Billie Stobo on guitar and vocals, Jerome Dunn on trombone, Rob Brown, as I said, on the drums, Jeffrey Dimmick on the bass, and Guido Bryant on guitar, organ, and vocals. I saw Billie Stobo years ago at the Palladium with a band called Wooden Smoke. And then years later, he got into another band called Golden Buddha.
Oh, I like that.
And I'll play one of their songs one of these times, too. And we did a few shows with them in Hollywood and Ventura area. And then Rob ended up playing with Billie in this band in Stobo. So really good. Great songwriter, great musicians. So anyways, that's the song.
Cool.
It's Love in a Higher Sense. Again, Stobo. We just want to say thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Yes, thank you very much.
Giving us your ear for an hour. Had a great time. We look forward to next week.
Absolutely.
And you guys have a great week and take it easy. Peace and love.
soldier, be a martyr, be a mourner, be a believer. If you don't like it, get up and break it. Be a lion, be a savior, be a hero, be a killer, be a preacher, but be unspoken. You can't love it if you don't respect it. Be a father, be a brother. It's that is love, love, love in the highest sense. Love, love, love in the highest sense. Love, love, love in the highest sense. Love, love, love. Oh, be a temple, be awakened, be an inscriber, and tell your story. You won't change it. You got to change yourself. Be your own fire. Be your rain dance. Yeah. It's inside is love, love, love in the highest sense. Love, love, love in the highest sense. Love, love, love in the highest sense. Love, love, love. Oh yes, it's love. Be a loner, be an explorer, be a real man, oh, and farm your future. If it's inside, hide it, let it out into the light. Be a star fire,